Are you ready, Kvon?
Yes, I believe I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Hey, so this is Real Talk, where we have the opportunity to talk with real leaders about everyday, really inspiring, insightful situations and issues. And I am thrilled today to have on here Kvon Tucker. Kvon, how you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to be with you. Kvon, you do leadership development, leadership coaching at Google. I know, let me see if I get your title correct. Global Head of Leadership Development for Google Staffing, right?
Google staffing, yes,
Great.
absolutely.
And we'd love to talk about that on this episode, but also one of your gifts, it sounds like, is actually coaching. You've got a nickname that you've acquired called the Leadership Whisperer, right?
Yeah, yes, it's something that has come into my lap, and I've just since kind of taken ownership of it. I don't even know where it came from, but it seemed appropriate for the work that I do.
So you've had some success helping leaders develop, work through, become successful, take on the role that they have within leadership within their various organizations that they work for. So I want to talk with you a little bit about that too. I saw, we don't know each other very well, do we? We've talked once before.
Yeah.
I saw you went to school in Long Beach, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
And
Beach.
you worked at Netflix before Google, correct?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of a journey. So, I started, like, my first big boy job was with Southern California Edison,
Okay.
and that was in learning and development, and I did a whole bunch of stuff in that space, and then branched out to Netflix, to manager development and some assessment development, all learning development, and then bumped up to Amazon for this wild journey, 18-month journey, working in the manager and leadership development department. Got to travel the world, facilitate with leaders across the globe, and then finally came home to Google, where I am now.
Let's just start. We can go into lots of different aspects of your experience, but let's start with this because I'm really curious about this. As you've worked with leaders at different levels, I assume in an organization, they may be brand new frontline leaders, managers, all the way up to maybe senior level, director level, that type of thing. And you've worked with them one-on-one. I'm talking more about the coaching you've done rather than the training classes that you probably have delivered as well. What have you found in your experience to be some of the biggest obstacles that keep them from really thriving as a workplace leader?
Yeah, if I could distill it, I think the challenge that a lot of leaders face has something to do with their connection to the human experience. It's something about connecting to the people that they work with, and or connecting to themselves, and or connecting, like, the impact that their behaviors have on the people that they are leading, and who the people that they lead are, and how do they connect to them to encourage folks to, in some ways, align and work together more effectively. Yeah.
At Learning Point, our firm, we talk about who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah.
Own your role begins with knowing yourself really well.
Mm-hmm.
So what kinds of things have you found to be effective in helping somebody make that, even the shift from sometimes knowing who you are as a worker, as an individual contributor, is different than when you move into that role of leader? So do you have any thoughts on what's helped?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a large part of the reason why my wife and I founded Consciously, and why we called it Consciously. Our whole goal with Consciously is to help people live their lives on purpose. And we found, my wife is a psychotherapist, and so we found between therapy and coaching, there's this overlap, and that overlap is self-awareness. And self-awareness both helps people lead more effectively, and it helps people heal. And the things that help you heal actually also help you lead effectively. So there's this really interesting kind of bilateral connection between these two practices. And so with leaders, what I have found is similar to what you're suggesting, is many people in general, not just people who are managing others, people in general have become successful because they were really good at doing something really well. No, myself included. I went throughout my whole career getting really good at doing certain things. And then one day I kind of woke up, I'm like, I don't really like doing what I'm doing anymore. And that happens a lot with leaders as well. Like, how did I even get here? I just kept doing what I was doing and was getting rewarded for it. And then next thing you know, and so what the work that I've been doing a lot with leaders is on who they are being and focusing on helping them develop who they are being or who they want to be or who they are becoming. And then so much of that work of exploring who you want to be, who you are, what are your values, what are your principles, then when you can have that kind of conversation and you build this well of being, then the doing comes out of that. And people feel like they're being themselves as a leader and doing the things that they want to do instead of doing the things that they're just rewarded for. That's a distillation of could be a 6 month, 12-month, 18-month journey for folks. But that's the essence of some of the work that I'm doing with leaders.
I love that. I think that turns on a light for me, the difference between learning a skill.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes we're asked, I'm sure you are too, is, hey, can you teach my team, you know, some conversational techniques or some
Yeah,
performance management techniques or problem solving techniques, conflict resolution techniques, skills, right?
yeah, absolutely.
And certainly there's some great best practices. There's been a ton of books written on the how to be a good leader.
Yeah,
But you nailed something that is interesting to me is, or how to do leadership, I should say, is different than how to become. The being part should
yeah,
come first, right? That's the heart, that's the center, right?
absolutely. That's my belief. And I think we, for whatever reasons, we are in a society where that's not the focus of our development. You know, my background is in psychology and organizational psychology. So I've studied human behavior my entire career, and just that has grown into leadership development. We aren't trained or taught how to self-reflect. And I really believe that it's a skill, is to say, okay, I am being asked to do this. Well, what does that mean for me? Right? How do I want to show up? What if I show up in this way? What might that do to my teammates? How might they react? And then what does that mean for me? So this skill that encourages self-awareness, the development of self-awareness, is not something that's often taught in school. It's taught in a lot of leadership courses, but so
Yeah.
much of the work that I do with leaders is to encourage this practice of self-reflection.
It probably is one of the first skills. So the skill of resolving a conflict is enhanced if you first start with the skill of self-reflection, is maybe a better way to
Absolutely.
put it, right? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I know in emotional intelligence, one of the main components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, obviously. So
Absolutely.
in your work right now, you mentioned that you've started this firm called Consciously with your wife.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
which means there's a partnership there, right?
There are
Near and dear to you.
multiple levels. Yeah.
So
Yes,
how's
absolutely.
that working?
I mean, I love it. And it's obviously it took a lot of thought. Like, do I want to go into business with my wife? And you can imagine two people who study psychology, one's a coach, one's a therapist. We talk a lot and we enjoy that and we reflect a lot and we help each other reflect a lot. And so through those conversations, I realized this overlap between mental health and healing practice and leadership development. And we're like, hey, like there's something here. We should explore this. And so from that we started our own research, and then from that we said, hey, you know what, like let's let's think about how do we help people live their lives on purpose. And that has this healing implication and it has this leadership development implication as well.
So in the past, what, 6 months, 7 months? I'm losing track of how many months it's been now. Let's see, since,
Yeah.
I don't know, February.
It's
We've
time
got
forward.
we've got COVID, right? And the this disruption of how we do work, just the emotional toll that it's taken on people, just, you know, in terms of their safety and their isolation or whatever it is, all those things combined. So we got that issue. We have also then the social unrest, right?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
going on. Both of those things infiltrate the organization, right? And you're kind of an
Absolutely.
interesting spot because you work within Google And then you also have this private practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you just share from your experience, whatever it's been over the past 6 or 7, 8 months, of how has that changed what the people that you coach, the leaders that you coach particularly,
Yeah.
want to talk about with you in terms
Yeah.
of either COVID or
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an insightful question. I find myself, so one of the things that I'm doing at Google is helping managers learn how to coach. And I won't go into details around like the why, but coaching is important to being an effective manager and being an effective
absolutely.
leader. And
Yeah.
so I'm helping managers develop how to become better coaches. And the name of one of these efforts is called Courageous Coaches.
Okay.
And courage, I think, in my estimation, is a good solve for fear. And like you mentioned, all the things going on in the world right now have a lot to do with fear.
Yeah.
And fear infiltrates our systems, it infiltrates our minds, and it infiltrates our bodies, potentially down to a molecular level. And so what I want to do is to help managers and leaders develop courage, be with their people, and sit in that discomfort to be able to have some conversations that most people wouldn't have because they're scared to have them inside of an organization.
Mhm.
So that's one part. It's like absolutely there's fear everywhere, right? And it's like fear in our homes, fear in our bodies. And so that's part of what I'm doing at Google. And then with Consciously, it's very similar, similar challenges, but the one-on-one coaching that I'm doing through Consciously, I am finding myself having like really more vulnerable conversations. And I'm finding that coaching, while it's important to help people kind of like get stuff done, what a lot of people want and kind of need today is to just process, just to have someone to be with them while they explore all the things that are going on, challenges that they're facing, or just have someone who's supportive of them. A model that I'm trained in is called process coaching, which is really just being with whatever emotions come up. And so many people in the world don't allow themselves space to just be. And so I'm finding myself doing a lot more of creating space for people to just process. So it's not as much of the doing. Obviously, there's learning, there's growth that happens from being, and that stretches people, and that can be wildly uncomfortable because a lot of people don't want to be with the uncomfortable emotions. They ask them, and that's what ends up getting people stuck, is that they don't acknowledge what they're feeling right there in that moment. So I've seen a shift. I know exactly what I want to get done. I have a to-do list. So I just need to sit with this for a while. And it's a very different kind of coaching. I just find myself doing more of that today.
If we're a person that isn't used to that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we've become very skillful at keeping those emotions over here and camouflaging everything by a to-do list or an action item or a project deadline or business talk, and all that. So we get through the day, but we're really depleting a lot of our soul, aren't we? That's
Yeah,
kind of what came to mind as you were talking.
absolutely.
And so if that's been my experience, then I probably at first are quite uncomfortable having that kind of conversation with you. Is this true?
Absolutely. There's a little bit of, I don't want to say masochist, but that's the word that comes to my mind. I get paid to make people uncomfortable. And I enjoy that because I know there's richness and there's growth. If all we're doing is doing what we always do, we're
Yeah.
not growing. And
Right.
so a lot of what I do, especially with really busy senior leaders, is to encourage them to stop and process. And when you do that, you get access to things you didn't have access to before. When you can stop and pause and connect with your body, the wisdom that's in your body, or the wisdom in your brain, or you do the work to integrate the wisdom up here and the wisdom in your heart or in your body, you have greater access to yourself, which means you can problem solve in new ways that you couldn't before. And that's why people get stuck. They often are too up here. They don't come down here. When
Down
you
here.
start to connect these two, so much more comes up.
Yeah, as you were talking, it reminded me of an experience I had not too long ago where I was on my way to lunch with with an individual who actually started a business. He's been very extremely successful in his organization. And we were going to lunch, and he was driving, and these two cars came rushing by. You know, it's like not road rage, but they were just in a hurry, and they kind of cut us off enough that it definitely startled me and got my blood boiling a little bit, you know. And I look over at him, he's as calm as can be.
Huh.
And I'm like, with these people, and he goes, no, he said something to the effect, my biggest concern is that they're in such a hurry, but I wonder if they even know where they're going, you know, which was kind of metaphorical.
Yeah,
They're in a real hurry, but are they going anywhere? You know, that they're on the hamster wheel every day. And I like what you're saying, because it, at least in my mind, you're helping leaders who have busy jobs, a lot of weight on them that they put on themselves, and their role is put on them. And you're helping them to, you said, stop, to slow down, you know, take a minute, breathe, and let's just be here for a minute and see if you can connect with some of those other aspects of who you are and the emotions that you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
That's great. Now there's a question on here, Kvon, from one of the listeners, which is, the question is, what made you make this shift? I assume that what they're referring to is the shift in the types of conversations that you've been having with these leaders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my job is to work with what shows up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I often would see a client, and, you know, you can tell, and I've been that client at times, right? I just come into the session, I just have so much going on, and I don't even know where to start. And so as a coach, I'm like, well, let's stop, right? Let's take a breath, let's pause, and then see what comes up. You know, if we can just, I don't want to say clear your minds, but if we can just make space for whatever wants to come up, to come up, then we can work with that, rather than, because we often have this tension, like we feel like we got to do something, or we got to say something, or we got to have the answer. Even as clients, you know, clients show up and they want to be good clients. And often it's the work that needs to be done in a coaching session is to not do so much, again, and to be. So to answer that question, I don't push my agenda on any of my clients. I work with what comes up, and because there's so much going on, it's often I'm spending a lot of time with my clients to just be with all the things that are happening for them.
That's awesome. And maybe they're a little more open to it, even though it may not be comfortable if they're not used to it, but they're more open to it now just because of what's going on. When you are at Google is a very interesting organization. I've been on the campus a couple times, I think. They're in Mountain View. Very impressed with how, obviously, the average age of their leaders is much younger than most organizations, right?
I mean, the organization itself is younger.
Yeah. You guys are very used to virtual meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the tech set up.
Yeah. And I was impressed. So I came in as a vendor, as a person hired to come and help them do some stuff. One thing that impressed me, and I'd love for you just to kind of share some insight on this, is that how Google had put systems in place. The tools were in place for them to conduct that business in a way that didn't leave them hanging all by themselves. They weren't doing it alone, but they also had some autonomy to take care of it in an efficient and a quick manner. Yeah. That's what I experienced. Now, is that consistent? Would you say that's kind of a common thing there, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, what I've found at Google is, I mean, we're a tech company, so we employ lots of tech. There's lots of internal tools that are developed by our own employees, which has enabled us to do all sorts of things in the ways that also fit into our culture. And one part of our culture that is really important is collaboration. So one of the values that is supremely important to Google's success. So that's collaborating with colleagues, collaborating with vendors, you know, collaborating with teammates, your manager. And so lots of tools and systems have been in place to facilitate collaboration. And so that might be a little bit of what you have experienced.
Yeah. The other question I had for you, Kvon, whether it be within your work in any of the organizations you've worked for, or now with your practice, have you had to help someone, a leader that you're working with, work through a significant failure, loss of job, a project that went south, rejection from, on terms of an idea or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything like that where you've had to work through that?
Yes. An idea, or not an idea, but one example, and it's like a tough thing because I want to like honor confidentiality.
Uh-huh.
I have had clients have really, let's just say one example is like a really big important meeting with either some clients or some other important stakeholders. And so I was thinking about this one client, they had a lot on the line, and they knew that if this meeting didn't go well, it was going to have dire consequences for them. So not necessarily like I might get fired, but this is really important.
Sure.
And so we did a lot of work to focus on them showing up the way that they wanted to show up. Like that was the success metric for them. And often when you show up the way that you want to show up and you're thoughtful about it, things go the way that you want them to. Yeah, that's what most of my
Feel
clients
better. Yeah.
but it doesn't always happen. And so we did a lot of work for this client to show up the way that they wanted to show up. And then the meeting didn't go the way that they wanted it to. But they showed up the way that they wanted to. And people just didn't happen to respond the way that he thought that they were going to respond. And so for us, obviously, there's the outcomes of not getting the impact that you want from your clients or your stakeholders. And that was something that we had to work on. And we kind of processed that for a couple sessions. And it's like, it hurt, it hurt a lot. Lots of learning that comes from that is, one, what does other people's reactions mean to you? Like, what does that mean to you? And what's the impact on you? So obviously there's this huge relationship between the outcomes or the impact that you're seeking versus what you actually get. So we learned a lot there. But also there's a win there, which is I was really nervous and anxious about showing up in this way, and I went and did it anyway, right? There's courage there. So while we built courage, we were out on the edge, didn't go the way that we wanted it to, and then we were able to, adapt and learn and grow through it. And then, that over the course of my coaching with that client, they were fine. They ended up being successful and happier through the end. But there was a bump. And I'm glad you asked this question, because something that when I sit down with a client for the first time, we do this thing called a discovery session. And a discovery session is 90 to 120 minutes where we just sit down and we talk about how we're going to work together, what they want from me, what I want from them as a client. And one of the things I promise my clients, I say this to every one of my clients, I promise if I'm doing my job well, you will fail. There will be a hard lesson learned if I'm doing my job well. If I'm not, if that doesn't happen, that means I didn't push you hard enough. Because if you're on the edge, if you're really pushing for growth and transformation, you're going to overreach from time to time.
Yeah.
That is a part of the journey. And that is what I want for my clients. If my clients don't fail in some way or don't learn some kind of hard lesson, that tells me I'm not pushing hard enough. And there's more goodness to be got.
I love that. I love what you talked about too, is that in that situation of helping that client of yours show up the right way for that important meeting, and that the outcomes of the meeting didn't necessarily go the way that they had wanted it to.
Yeah.
But that's different than their objective of showing up the way that they wanted to show up, or being the kind of person they wanted to be in that meeting, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is critically important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because it's growth in all sorts of directions, right? And again, that's what I want for my clients is growth and transformation. Obviously, I want them to be successful as well, but my focus is on who they are becoming, less on the things that they are doing. I look at the things that they are doing as practice opportunities for who they are becoming. So this to me was a win in them becoming who they want to be. It's like living life on the edge, but it doesn't always feel good. And that's like a hard lesson learned, right? And we all know that growth does not always feel good. And we're learning that right now as a civilization.
That's great. Good. In your practice with consciously, your partner is your wife. Okay. Do you have your own set of clients, or do you ever have mutual clients where you're both working with the same person?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because we were just talking about that the other night. So that is actually going to be something that we begin to offer. Maybe it's early next year, but it's an area that we would like to grow as we are seeing. Some people need a coach, and some people could really benefit from both. And we're well equipped to provide both. And so we would love to explore what that looks like. So if anyone's interested, that is a new area that we're going to start to dabble into. And we'll probably start with 1 or 2 clients just to see how it works. But certainly, I think it's a unique area that we are positioned well to support. But it could be like a new kind of offering for different coaching firms like ours, coaching consulting firms.
I would think some people need a coach, some people need a therapist. I think
Mhm.
I would think that could definitely be true, because we need to get the head and the heart aligned before we worry about the techniques. Otherwise, we come across as just technique-ish, right? So
Absolutely, yeah. It's what I have noticed, and there have been times when I've been working with a client, like a manager or director inside an organization, and the part of me thinks this person could really benefit from a therapist. And not to say that they're, it's a problem per se, but there are just certain aspects, certain parts of oneself, certain parts of one's identity that therapists are more skillful at dealing with. As a coach, I have a certain skill set, and there are things that I can help people round out their identity and help people move forward. But there's some things that some therapists are even more well equipped at that help people process more efficiently and more effectively than a coach. So there are times when I'm like, oh, it might be beneficial. So to be able to partner with my wife in that way would be, I think, really, really powerful for some people.
that could be cool.
Yeah.
I got a text from one of my colleagues who's listening. Or I don't know if they're on here or not, but they asked, the question has to do with what are Kvon's favorite books?
Favorite books. Great question. I have a few. Top of the line, one of my favorite books is a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck.
Yep.
My wife actually gave that book to me, and it changed my life. Practice of discipline. It helped me define my definition of love. My definition of love is the extension of oneself for the betterment of another. It's actually a part of my purpose. My personal purpose is to witness, love, and guide. And so that book has been heavily influential on me. I can't help but think about one of my gurus in the consulting and leadership space, which is Edgar Schein.
Mhm.
And so I couldn't even name one book, but the Humble series, Humble Inquiry, Humble Consulting, Humble Leadership, I just eat that stuff up. His perspective on culture and leadership, like that's the stuff that, it's like I'm a big leadership nerd, so I read that stuff before I go to bed. So anything Edgar Schein, I'll eat that up. And as I'm looking, I have it up here too, Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. I mean, he also has this other book called Presence. I just love him. Similar, he's like an Edgar Schein. He's like spiritual leadership development people. That's my whole space. So that's a few. I could go on. I am a bit of a reader, and I have a little bit of a habit. My wife has made me get rid of some of my books here in the last couple of years, but those are a few that come to mind. But yeah, I could go on.
I like your list, and it's consistent with what I think the message that you're providing is to, start with yourself first, work on yourself, work on becoming who you need to become. I've taken I guess a renewed interest in, I'm going to use the word brain science, just this idea of self-talk.
Yeah.
And just the neuroscience of the dialogue that we're having with ourselves every day and how we're interpreting. You and I could be looking at the same event, and you're going to have a different experience than me based on the stories you're telling yourself, right? That type of thing.
Absolutely.
And just how much our own mental, I think with my experience working with leaders, one of the biggest stumbling blocks for them where they undermine their success is because of the dialogue, the inner dialogue they're having with themselves, right? So I don't think that my self-talk is going to change an event that happens out there, but it could change my behavior,
Yes.
which enables me to show up differently in that important meeting, like in the example you're talking about. So,
So critical.
yeah, do you have any thoughts or insight on?
So much of that is, you know, so again, my background psychology, organizational psychology, and a lot of what the brain-based science is kind of based on like cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, this is what my wife would say. And so it's something that I've leaned to as well recently. And there's this a new wave of, or a new model almost of practice for coaches in the space. And I encourage you or others who are interested to look up Positive Intelligence by SHIRZAD CHAMINE. It's an organization he developed, and I'm a practitioner and I'm actually getting certified in it now. And it's all about that. It's all about identifying what we would call your saboteurs.
Mm.
And your saboteurs are fear-based. They typically respond or they answer the statement, in order for me to be successful or safe, I have to. And so that's something that develops in early childhood often, but sometimes through major events. And generally it's, you know, things like your inner people pleaser, your hyperachiever,
Yeah.
your controller, your hyper vigilant self. So the part of you that like might be really scared or wants to please people, these parts of ourselves have helped us be successful up to a point. They've helped us stay safe up to a point. But to move beyond that for growth and transformation, we have to develop these sages within us. And our sages are ones who can empathize. They're the wise self. They're the loving, innovative parts. They're the ones who say yes and instead of yes but. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing now and focusing on is essentially what you're suggesting, is helping people become aware of their saboteurs. You know, like the one who says, I can't do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I'm not supposed to do that, or I have to do that, to the developing your sage who says, oh, I can do that, and I will do that, and I want to do that, and I'm totally capable, right? And that's the more powerful part of you. So yeah, it's so much of this is just programming. One part, our saboteurs tend to live in our limbic system, and our sages live in our prefrontal cortex. And so really it's just about developing the gray matter in this part of your brain and letting that other part of your brain atrophy a little. So one part of is, you know, the neural connections are just a bit stronger.
Positive Intelligence, and the name of the person that?
SHIRZAD CHAMINE.
SHIRZAD CHAMINE. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent, good. So Kvon, we have just a few more minutes on here. As you look forward over the next 6 months, 10 months, 18 months, what do you foresee when it comes to change, individual change, organizational change, societal change? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How do you think this is going to play out for us all?
Yeah. I am very optimistic. I am very optimistic. I look at where we are today as this tremendous growth opportunity. Right? We are all growing through the challenges that we're facing today. And so I'm very optimistic that we will and are learning a lot of lessons about who we need to be or become to be the kind of species and human beings and borrowers of this planet that we need to be. We're learning a lot right now, you know, and so I think that those lessons, similar like what you do in coaching, those lessons have yet to be really integrated. They have yet to been practiced and embodied. So who we are becoming over the next 6 to 12 months is probably going to continue to be a little uncomfortable because we're going to be stretching in new ways, hopefully. But over the course of time, I'm confident that we're going to come out of this wiser, you know, more connected to ourselves, more connected to others, more careful of the planet and of each other. And so I don't know how long it's going to take us for us to kind of come through this transformation that I think is happening for our species. You know, it's not just in the United States. United States is in a place, but there's stuff going on all over the world.
Yeah.
Our species is going through a transformation right now, and I am confident that it's going to be for the better. Yeah, and I have thoughts about like what and who we'll need to become, but I think we're starting to see glimpses of that already.
To circle back to where we started and the types of coaching conversations that you're having with leaders these days, what's made the shift? Is it easier for them now to have those conversations than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago? As you were describing this learning phase that we're in and what the future could look like as we start to integrate what we've learned, it occurred to me that perhaps part of this learning experience that we're going through has allowed us, it's enabled us to shed some of the things that we have become very comfortable with, right?
Absolutely.
But are holding us back from having those more vulnerable conversations. So we're stepping into those more. We're more motivated, and we don't have these artificial restrictions as much anymore.
Absolutely.
Because of maybe the crisis, whatever we want to call it, right? It could be my job's different. I don't get to go to work. You know, I'm worried about the money, health issues, social, political type challenges, family challenges, all of that. Maybe we open up a little bit more, or at least that when we do, we find, hey, I didn't need that as much as I thought I did, right?
Yeah, the conversations are changing all over the world. You know, we're being much more authentic and more vulnerable in many conversations. And in some places, the fear has set in, and people are maybe a little bit more constricted. I
Yeah.
feel like on average, we are more open. You know, and we've been, in some ways, we've been kind of cracked open. And I think that will continue to occur, and I think that's good for us. And again, it doesn't always feel good, but I do believe it's for the betterment of our species. We have to be open to connect, and we're doing that in new ways today. You know, we're in each other's homes now. We've never done that before. You know, so it's a nice thing.
Yeah, like Google, they've been at this virtual meeting thing for a while, but the world in the last 7 months, you know, it's funny because I have a 5-year-old grandson who knows what Zoom means now. Okay. And my mother, who's in her 80s, she's 84, she associates Zoom, or she used to associate Zoom with a type of cereal. It was like cream of wheat. It was a brand name, Zoom. But now we've all opened up. I mean, every enterprise they may not make this be their standard mode of business, but every enterprise now sees how virtual meetings and virtual communication around the world could be part of their toolbox, right?
Absolutely.
And the way they do business would change. So that's a mechanical thing. I know a lot of what you're talking about is more the human emotional person, the human experience thing, which I absolutely agree with. But there's also some logistical things that weave into this as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the two are intertwined, right? And I think when technology is used well, it helps us be better at who we are, right? And when it's not used so well, it helps us be worse at who we already are, you know? And so I think that what we're experiencing today, I mean, I look at this as a little bit, this might be my inclination, but a little bit of like a spiritual evolution, right? And technology is a part of that. You know, it's really helping facilitate connection in new ways and with people across the globe and more frequently if you so choose. And so there's a lot of good that is coming. And again, it's not all good, right? It doesn't all feel good, but I think that we're moving forward, and technology is a huge part of that. You know, why wouldn't it be?
Kvon, we're out of time. I really appreciate your taking time to talk with me today. How can people find you if they wanted to get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
I mean, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm tremendously grateful for you spending some time with me and letting me get to know you a little bit and letting me share my perspective. To get a hold of me, best way is consciously.one, or my email, kvon@consciously.one. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just type Kvon Tucker. Yeah, those are the best.
Well, so again, thank you, Kvon.
Thank you so much.
Say hello to your wife and thank her for giving you an hour to do this.
Yes, absolutely,
Maybe we'll
absolutely.
do it again with the two of you together, okay?
Oh, that would be fantastic. I'd love that.
All
You
right.
know, my thing is people often enjoy me and enjoy spending time with me, and then when my wife shows up, I just kind of fall to the shadows. She's much more impressive.
Well,
So
there's nothing we have in common then. So that's great. All
beautiful.
right. Take care, Kvon. We'll
All
be
right,
in touch
thank you, Mark.
soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.